Thank you. And right now you should be seeing the screen with our shop here. And I wanted to, that's all you see, right? Just the shop screen. I see a whole bunch of other windows up here, but I'm not going to look at that. I'm going to close some windows here. And just to let you know, we did have our talent search APR webinar last week, but it is available on the YouTube channel. So you want to go ahead and access that if you haven't already. We also have, if you need help with either your EOC or talent search APR, you need an additional one-on-one assistance. We also offer that. That's an allowable cost, but you could watch the free video anytime you want on our YouTube channel, which Donna or Leah will put in the chat. Also, for those of you that are working with SSS programs, Teresa, this just went live. I'll do a blog posting, but it is live for y'all to register. If anybody out there, you have any friends with SSS, you know, they have some new CPPs, new to them for 25-30 funding cycle. We're going to have a webinar on implementing and reporting on the CPPs. And that will take place. We also have the link there, but you can go to our webpage. It is an allowable cost. It's an hour-and-a-half webinar. We'll be talking about this in detail. So it is $300 per registrant, an allowable cost to talk about those CPPs because you need to report on them on the APR. As you well know, with Talent Search and EOC, we have EOCs that we have to report on. And of course, just another plug here for our proposal writing courses on Wix, available via for EOC and Talent Search. Really great way to go ahead and start working on each section of your proposal at your pace, at your time, with resources, to-do lists, also quizzes there to help you gauge your understanding of the current regulations and selection criteria there. And just to get started, you know, those are unallowable costs. There is a cost associated with that, but for free, we have our TRIO umbrella regulations course, just to get you all used to utilizing the system, the Wix course system that we utilize. So for free of charge, it's a 90-minute class on the umbrella regulations impacting all the TRIO programs. We also have another 7 or 8 for each of the individual TRIO programs, hour-and-a-half sessions that go into everything and anything, great onboarding, great new directors training, or even for what we call veteran or seasoned directors to come back and kind of check base or check in with the regulations and things like that. So what we're doing is we're offering the free course, the first course free of charge, just to give you a taste to see if it's something that you'd like to go ahead and invest in. And then we have also for our professional development courses, the whole package here. And these are allowable costs. We have them here for most of the TRIO programs. And then we also have some other services. We have budget management. We're going to launch and break down into separate services regarding that. So if you can't right now, don't have the carryover or don't have the funds for this full package, maybe you want the spreadsheet, or maybe you want someone to check out your budget for compliance and to help you with planning. You know, there's also packages there that we're working on. In addition to our other services here, almost all of them, 99% of them are allowable cost, except for anything having to do with the proposal, which leads us into why we have to have this during our lunch hour, because we're not allowed to talk about federal funding. Or even someone asked me, Teresa, what about data collection? And it says right there in that regulation, anything with research or working on a proposal, a federal proposal on federal time, it's called an indirect cost. It cannot be charged to the grant. So from your grant, your college gets, or your agency gets, indirect funds. They could take some of those indirect funds as they're being paid out, you know, for every dollar you pay out, you know, 8 cents, you know, 8%. They can use for indirect on anything they need to, the agency or college. They have to pull it out of your account, put it in their account. They could turn around and use it to help you pay for somebody to write your grant, pay you to write the grant, but separate from your working hours. So that's why we're meeting during lunchtime. That's why our WIC courses are really cool, because you're really not even supposed to be attending a grant writing workshop while you're on federal funds, while you're getting grant. You know, you can't get grant funds while you're getting paid out of grant funds, so to speak. That's a big no-no. So you want to make sure that you know, the plan is that you're going to work on this during lunch, after hours, and on weekends, or you have some sort of agreement through your institution or college. where they're going to pay for your time and effort on this out of other funds. That's the way it's supposed to be. And we will repost, and I think I should have it posted, that regulation. I think we have it somewhere on our website, Donna, proposal costs. When you get a chance, if you could put it into the chat just so that everyone has that handy. I see it all the time, Teresa, but I never memorize the wording so I can just, come off my lips. But I always, give you the shortened version, or like, this means this. But I really would feel better if we would post it in the chat just so you could see the language, because I think some of y'all may be needing to see that regulation, if not for yourselves, but also for your institution. And Teresa, I know, as always, I put you on the spot here, but how do you recall, how did it work where you were at? And everyone has a different setup, but when it came time to grant writing, what was the plan there to keep it separate yet something that could actually happen? And I'll tell you how it was with Aaron. You're muted, my dear.
Okay. I was the grant writer for the TRIO programs that I oversaw, and we had about 6 by the time I left, or 5 by the time I left, that fell up under that area. And so basically I got up about 3 o'clock in the morning on a regular day, and I wrote until I actually went into the office around 8 o'clock. That's pretty much how I pretty much managed the writing piece. I was 100% the writer, so it was easy for me to navigate that. When it came to there was an element of strategic planning that we had incorporated into our programs every year. So because we already had strategic planning as part of our work, we actually utilized some of that time, the strategic planning process, to do some of the data capturing and things of that sort. So because it was part of our culture of what we were doing anyway, we used that time to also leverage other opportunities, and some of that did cross over, but it was specifically for strategic planning each year.
I love that. And that's what we in the past have also utilized when we asked to present at conferences, at a pre-conference.
Mhm.
And I tell them, well, look, if we do a grant writing workshop, then if you're charging folks, then you have to make sure they know it's out of non-project funds. Okay, there, thank you. It's in the chat right now, the proposal costs. Or we could do professional development where, the questions to the grant are in the regulations, Teresa.
Mhm.
So if we did a regulation training
Right.
where we went through that specific section, there's a way to do it if you don't bring up the word proposal. And if you don't say the readers say that, if we have discussion about the questions,
Mhm.
and like even in the needs section, we would call it need assessment, just like you do an annual needs assessment of your students. You need to do once every 5 years, or definitely once every 5 years. You could lump it under project evaluation. And
Mhm.
one of the things could be listed, one of the components is there still a need for this program? So
Mhm.
you could do a needs assessment in the form of a program evaluation or program planning. You could also look at your objectives and see how you've been doing compared to your APR. So that can be something that indirectly you could be deciding what your percentages might be in the future, or getting some idea of how we're doing with our current baseline and how we did. More importantly, your plan of operation when you do an evaluation, even if it's internal, like Teresa's saying, strategic, what did you call it? Strategic planning meeting?
Yeah, it was a strategic planning meeting, and then those other elements you talked about, we did
Mhm.
those things annually. So it
Right.
did not, it was no appearance that it was something new,
Oh, I
just
love
a
it.
grant
I
cycle.
love it. So if you do it a little bit every year, then also it doesn't become a scary monster at the end of the 5 years, because you've been doing it in bits and pieces. I love that. So if you can incorporate that as part of your annual assessment or strategic planning or assessment,
Mhm.
then it's done gradually in an appropriate way. And actually, Teresa, is probably mentioned in your current evaluation plan that you're going to do these sorts of things
Yeah.
to see how you're doing, right, in performance, and also seeing if the way you provide the required services, if it's being effective or not, based on feedback from staff or participants, or even target school folks, because I'm sure we all said in our evaluation plan, we're going to do these surveys of students. And so I can see that you could realistically and also appropriately every year during the summer before the next year starts, do an assessment and tweak things, or, not only that you want to implement right away, but that you can, if you put it in writing as part of your policies, procedures, plan to deliver services, and I can see how you can already have more than enough that what you could pull an outline for your plan of operation. Would you not agree, Teresa? Something's
Yes, I agree. And again, it's not it gets, the closer it gets to grant writing, it may be a little bit more robust with what we do. However, it's built into what we do annually so that it's part of our operating plan and our operations of the work that we did. And then that way it just, there was no appearance that we were doing anything different. We were just a little bit more intense
right.
with what we were doing when it came around the grant writing season.
So there's a way to do it, and follow your evaluation plan. Your evaluation plan, in a way, funny enough, is not only like when I was a director, Teresa, honestly, I ignored the evaluation plan. I was just trying to survive, right?
Yes.
Now I see it as a rescue boat in a sense, because it gives me the reason, the rationale, and the excuse to change things that I don't like that were
Mhm.
written in the proposal, or not that I don't like, that are not working or obsolete. And I used to think I can't change anything in the proposal. Well, no,
Mhm.
your evaluation plan tells you need to check stuff out and make changes as needed moving forward. So that's the part there. Also, this annual needs assessment gives me the purpose and the excuse to go ahead and do what I need to do under the guise of professional development and program improvement. But underlying that, I'm actually getting ready for the proposal in an allowable way. Okay, so use that evaluation plan so that you're not waiting until the fifth year to do anything about it. Okay, so there are ways to, if you all, even as a state association, have a Zoom meeting where you get together and say, well, let's talk during business hours, but let's talk about, like, for instance, in talent search with your state association, y'all should have Zoom calls about, hey, what are y'all using for your definition of rigorous secondary school program of study? Because in most states, and those definitions go back to whatever the state, the first two, whatever the state says is rigorous and whatever the state says is an honors program. So you would think y'all would get together in the same state and decide, hey, what is it and what are you utilizing, and how, is it something that's appropriate for us? And can we show that there's a need, meaning that the target schools, although they may offer that by law, the whole thing is to show or to present the case to the reader that there's not enough academic support. There's not enough support to help students academically achieve that, or be successful with that program. So, that you can have those types of discussions. Just try to make sure you don't use the word proposal, readers, and then just have a discussion about the definitions, because they are in the regulations. Don't bring up the program, don't bring up the RFP from last time. Go to your talent search or EOC regulations and go through those instead and call it a regulatory training. Okay, but very, very careful about the language that you use. I know I have to do that, Teresa, when I do these pre-cons. I have to struggle to be more restrained than I am with you right now. I can say readers, I can say proposals, I can say this is what happened. I can do that because we're on a lunch hour. If we were doing it during a pre-con that I was charging you out of project funds, I'd have a totally different, I'd share with you not anything proposal related in the sense, but I'd share with you the regulations, not the RFP that I'm going to share with you in a second. There's a difference, even though what I'm sharing with you in the RFP comes from the regulations, right, Teresa? So there's a way to do
Exactly.
it. Okay.
Mhm.
So just put it out there. So there is something in the chat. I don't know, Teresa, if you can help me answer this. If we put in time outside of regular hours, can we document our additional time spent on grant tasks so we can have meetings during normal business hours? I guess you're talking about comp. I mean, just switching your hours around. I'm thinking when others are available, i.e., our school staff and administrators. Um, yeah. So you're,
So, oh,
go
go
ahead.
ahead.
Go. No, you go ahead, Teresa.
So when you start talking about outside hours and things of that sort, if it's related to grant writing, I would say that there's really not, it's not necessary to document it if it's not on work time, because I think the documentation is what gives evidence that you're working on grants during work, during any hours, I guess you could say. So I don't know that the documentation is necessary because that makes it more official and formal, and it appears to be related to your job duties. However, it is, okay to have, meetings after, like we're having now, like during lunch and after hours, having lunch and learns, and after hours, that may be a way to potentially have your meetings with your, the staff, with the administrators in the school. If the school is inviting you in, if so, another thing, part of our rhythm every year was to have a meeting with our point of contact at the schools, every year. So again, when we have our meeting, toward the grant cycle time, then the agenda item is really about how we want to move forward. Do you all have any feedback as we're preparing for the next 7 years strategically? How can we better serve you all and things of that sort. So I think that if that's a conversation you're having on a, like I said, when I got my first site visit, I really I learned from what I needed to make sure that I did, and that was they asked me for the meeting minutes for my with my principals annually. It was part of our site visit for our trio projects, and they actually looked at all of our trio projects. And so with that, the conversation of what we were talking about within those conversations annually, to me, that falls into when you're actually thinking about writing a grant in the future. That is a part of the conversation, but it's not the conversation for that particular meeting. So if you build the culture along the way, it allows for you to be able to incorporate some of the anatomy of the grant writing without it being called grant writing, because that's not necessarily what it is. In our mind, that's what it is. But from a partnership perspective, working with schools and things of that sort, it can be part of, if it's part of your rhythm, then it's a natural conversation that would occur from a strategy perspective. So that's that first part of it. Um,
Mhm. Okay. So I just said, at the Boys and Girls Clubs, because I was like you, Teresa, I was the director and the grant writer.
yeah.
I mean, right? And so they did not say, oh, we're going to pay you extra to write it, Lisa. That was not the conversation. So the deal what they made with me is that I, in the morning, was coming in to work on the grant, but I really was off the clock. I was there so I could go and talk to target school folks, do what I needed to do. And then my work hour for a while started at 1 p.m. with the federal funds. And but see, as an agency, Boys and Girls Club, we were open till 8 o'clock at night. And so there was always something to do. And we also had Upward Bound. So it wasn't, unusual to do that. I was able to do it. And that's how I did it. And if you ask, about documentation, yes, I would keep my little notes about, or my timesheet would show at the time, believe it or not, I was working, from 1 to, a certain amount of time on each grant. So it said there, so it looked like I was off, but I wasn't off. I was there. And sometimes a lot of times as director, if you don't do it, it's not going to get done. So, you have to be careful and you have to, take care of it. Now, if you're working with a grant writer, then, and there's times where you need to meet with them, then you need to coordinate and also, I guess, keep track of that time. And if you spend an hour and a half there, then you need to give the project back an hour and a half of the time. Okay, that's what I would think. I think that's the Q&A that we had. So, I mean, someone asked about the EOC APR, and Teresa, I have no idea. I mean, it said, well, I'm sorry, I do have an idea. What's on the website there. I believe it says it's going to open on the 29th. I don't think it's going to open on the 29th, but that's what it says. And it says it's due on December 4th, I believe. And that's what they say. I don't know. The government shut down, certain things, even direct payments are not working, right? So I don't know if that's going to stick, but so I take that back. I'm sorry. I was getting confused with another APR. There's so many of them. So I just can go by the dates that are listed there. I will look on the 29th. I will be surprised, Teresa, if it's active on the 29th. But this is the thing. I was telling the Talent Search folks during the webinar that we had with them, you keep working on that thing, because once we get back up, don't be surprised if they say, okay, the due date's the same. And people are like, oh, I was waiting for it to open to work on it. No, 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 no. Everyone right now, by now, is finalizing section 4 for EOC and Talent Search, probably just in the verifying if their students met their objectives last year or by the beginning of this fall semester for college enrollment, and for Talent Search students that graduated 6 years ago. You should be in the process of wrapping that up. Everything you need is off. You can get off the old instructions. I stress this, Teresa, because I had some folks asking questions and that they really thought that you couldn't work on the APR until the APR website opened up. And I said, no, the APR website is to open up just for you could upload your stuff and not necessarily to start. So that needs to be happening right now. So you all use your deadline, stick to your deadline of making sure, and don't wait till December 4th. At the latest, do think that it's due December 1st. With the clients we're working at, we're trying to push it so that it's going to be done the first week of November, and then just sit on it and wait. Some people are needing to download the spreadsheet that the department has about students that graduated 6 years ago, Teresa, and went to college, if they don't have access to it now, because that list came from y'all initially 6 years ago. But I don't know how many people here were with the program 6 years ago to remember. So that might be the only hiccup for Talent Search, but everything else should be done. So go back and watch that APR webinar for Talent Search that we just did last week on the YouTube. And for EOC, I know we haven't had it yet. Donna, I'm not sure what the dates are right now. I can't remember off the top of my head, but we do have on the YouTube channel the APR webinar for 23-24, which basically nothing has changed officially. So I would watch that now, EOC, if you're wanting to confirm that you're on the right track. Okay.
Lisa, our webinar will be November 12th for EOC.
November 12th. Okay. All right. But if you don't want to wait that long, look at the old one. And I don't know if you've probably already done this, Donna, putting the YouTube channel link. So don't wait for that. By the time you meet with us on the 12th, it should be to confirm or to ask any questions that you're kind of concerned about, or what about this? What about that? But start now. Okay. Thank you so much. All right. So Teresa, today what I wanted to talk about is something that we mentioned last week that we would cover, is the quality of personnel, which is going to be very, very unique. And I guess now would be a good time to find out, if you don't mind, Donna, how many folks are with Talent Search and EOC. Last week, I was sharing with you the EOC RFP, or program application. And this week, I'm going to be sharing the Talent Search RFP program application, specifically the section of quality of personnel, because it's pretty similar, I think almost exactly worded the same for both Talent Search and EOC. So if you could let us know, y'all, you should see it now. If you're with Talent Search or EOC, or with both, let us know. Naturally, mathematically, we should always have more Talent Search folks because there are more Talent Search programs than EOC. And I don't see anyone, maybe because I can't see it, but is anyone answering? Or are they?
Yes.
Okay, good. Okay, that's weird. Okay.
And there's some questions in the Q&A as well.
Okay, do you want to go ahead and take it, Teresa?
Yeah. So the first question is Trio EOC person. When we are asking for quotes from our agency or community partners, sometimes they do not know who is first gen or low income. How can we craft a question to get the data we need?
Well, I'm curious, right, Teresa, when you're asking for quotes in the needs section, if that's what you're referring to, I like them to tell me why they think, for example, why do you think there's so many low-income students at the target school? Like if it's or let's see, agencies, community partners. Okay, are you EOC? My bad, EOC. All right, so let's say you find out that the unemployment rate is very high. Or let's say you're trying to prove that there's a lack of resources for folks that want to get that there's employment needs, and there's folks in the target area that are lacking the educational credentials for those positions. Okay, let's say you have that hard data, or maybe you're seeking it. This is where you would ask them, can you tell me, based on your expertise, why do you think there's such a gap? I don't think from them you're going to get exactly, first gen or low income. You could always ask, like, I guess with the GD centers, you could ask the GD directors, how many of these students that you're working with tend to get their GED within a year, or would fill out a college application on their own. I don't know. Do you understand that question, Teresa? Is why they would need to know who first gen low
I
income
think,
is?
well, I think that, I mean, so if you're getting a quote, you're probably not trying to get them to determine eligibility of your participants. And
Right.
that's more at first gen low income is more of an eligibility type of criteria. If it's a quote, usually, your quotes they can have quantity in it, but if they do not have quantity in it, it's okay. But I think, part of it may be, terms like college completion. Um, and I know you may not potentially put this in the proposal, but economically disadvantaged students who may, or populations that have been disadvantaged, um, public assistance eligibility. A large percentage of our students are on public assistance. So there may be some buzzwords that are used, and not necessarily first gen and low income, and specifically the percentage. That's kind of what my thoughts are.
Yeah, they do not need to tell you the eligibility. You basically need to ask them, well, why did you find from stats the percentages where they can determine low income first generation, whatever stats you have, and then you ask the community agencies as to why they think this is the case.
Yeah.
Right. But they don't have to tell you, oh, it's because it's 33% or it's 80% low income, so that should be something you shouldn't have to worry about. Okay. So I hope that was helpful. And again, in the Google Drive for EOC, there are some sample quotes. So if you want to check those out, maybe to get you started as to what kind of quotes. Remember, we're trying to get quotes from folks, the target schools and the community agencies, and more so in EOC to help you get the baseline, but they are not responsible, or you could also, if you wanted to, let them know, well, aren't most of your students receiving federal assistance or something like that? Most of them will be able to, maybe not, they might not know first gen, but probably low income. But like Teresa was saying, it's not their responsibility to give you that eligibility breakdown, but it's in their expertise as to why the issue is there. Instead of having just a table and you saying it, get someone else to say, the reason why there's such a high number of low income families in the target area is this and this. Okay. Or according to so and so. Okay. What they think. All right. So let me go ahead, and we did have 66% of y'all are with Talent Search, but we're going to go ahead and shift over to, did I go to the Talent Search Google Drive? Yes, so I'm going to be sharing, and you should be able to see it, correct? We're okay?
Yes, yes.
Great. Okay, so I am going to, and pretty much, I'm sure it's around the same page for the EOC. RFP or grant application. So if you look in the Google Drive, there is for Talent Search in that folder, it looks like this RFP package of instructions. And in the EOC version of the folder, go there and look for the package instructions. It'll say EOC 2021. And for Talent Search, I'm looking at the bottom of page 30. It might be a little different, somewhere in the 30s for EOC, but the questions are almost exactly the same. The points are exactly the same. So whether you're with Talent Search or EOC, this should be a conversation that we can have with both groups together. When it comes to the needs section, we kind of have to break up, in a way. Plan of operation, we break up. Objectives, we kind of have to keep it separate. But we talk about quality of personnel and also the applicant and community support section. We can get together. And at times, sometimes even the evaluation plan, we can get together, and the budget. So this is one of the times we could do something together, right? So this section is the, let me go up a little bit. Again, this is something directly out of the RFP. This is grant related, but this comes from the regulations. So if y'all want to get together with your state organization or during the regular business hours as a regional or state group, or a couple of you directors getting together, do it during the workday, but don't go here. Go to the EOC or talent search regulations. There's a section where it says the selection criteria. It's part of the regulations, and got, and promote it or talk about it as, yeah, we can talk about this. Let's shoot ideas about what this means, because we're looking at the regulations. We're doing a deep dive into the regulations. Well, right now we're doing a different take, or the focus is what are the readers going to be looking for, and get specific answers to get funding, to get the points, whereas the other one can be a general discussion about what do you think this means, and like a self-assessment, like Teresa was saying, is our director currently in compliance? What are the requirements listed right now? Let's look at those and do a needs assessment to see if they need to be updated to match what HR says, or other things. Now we're gonna have discussion as to what needs to be updated specifically, and y'all could have the discussion too with your other directors about the the removal of the trigger words, the new moving forward, how this section you know uh has a part to it that stresses preferential treatment at times, and that's the way it was designed, Teresa, right? It was designed to do that, so to speak, and now we're not supposed to do that, so we'll get to that. So the quality of personnel, speaking directly from the RFP, which is also listed in the regulations, is 9 points. The secretary evaluates the quality of the personnel the applicant plans to use in the project on the basis of the following. I did have a client one time, Teresa, that said, well, everybody's been in place for the last, 10 years plus. So can I just say, everyone's in place? We don't need to, this is like if someone's going to be new, right? It says the plans to use. And I said, no, every year it's new funding. So we've got to go ahead and answer the question completely. So the first part is the qualifications required of the project director, and it's three points. So, in this discussion, I have to tell you that although it's not a regulation, and someone asked this question specifically last time, they said, will the Department of Ed consider a director that doesn't have a master's degree for talent search? And I said, well, the Department of Ed program officer may consider it if you guys go back and forth and talk about it. But I will tell you that the reader will not, and the reader will be told not to consider that enough for the project director just to have bachelor's degree required, master's degree preferred. I strongly suggest, no, I mean, I would not, I would take points off if I was a reader and it did not state that the director has not only a master's degree, but specifies the years in which they've been involved in programs such as this, which I would assume would be a little bit longer than how many years they had in direct management experience. Okay. And I would also want to look for a master's degree. Give me at least 2 or 3 different fields instead of one field and put or other related field in that area. So I'm looking for the academic requirement. Again, it's, I mean, the unofficial, but the thing that's gotten me in the past is where the director, it's not mandatory, or it's not required, a master's degree. So I'm going to tell you that I'm looking for, and the readers will be told to make sure the director has a master's degree in a specific field. Give me 2 or 3 fields, and the timing of their overall experience plus their experience as being a director. And Teresa, I'll turn it over to you, and I'll share my sad story, which I think you've all have heard. But once you lose $1 million, you never forget how you lose $1 million. I don't know about you.
Yeah, so definitely we talked about the masters last week, but also you, in addition to what Lisa said, just ensuring that you're emphasizing experience and alignment with student outcomes, not just administrative oversight, but they've been in the work of outcomes of students, and they've been successful in those areas. And then I think the other piece is and then of course I think Lisa said this as well, prior work in programs supporting the population, the TRIO, eligible populations, is also another area to emphasize for the project director's qualifications.
Mm-hmm. And this is where I go on and on about it because I put for EOC that the director, I put master's degree preferred, bachelor's degree required. I did everything else, Teresa, and I was thinking it was for a agency in a rural area, and I was thinking I got this, no, but I don't want them to have a hard time finding a director, because it's going to be hard to find a director in the rural area at that salary. So let me help them out ahead of time, and I actually messed them up, and I cost them the grant. I should have just gone ahead and put master's degree required because that was the only point they took off, and I didn't get funded. I should have put master's degree required and then help them later on. Try to find somebody, or like that person who asked the question, would the department consider it? Yeah, they would if you could show that you tried. You can always request to modify the qualifications required for the directors if you can demonstrate a hardship or that you went through the steps and no one's biting, or you can't find somebody, and so you have that opportunity, but you want to be in the fight to have that fight. And I kind of blew it for them, so that's why I go back to this, and it haunts me to this day. So that's why a little bit of a revenge, once you've been done like that, Teresa, then sorry. My thing is I'm going to tell as many people as possible, don't do what I did. Don't do it. Don't do it. Do it and then deal with it later. Ask for forgiveness later, because I'll be the first one to take points off. And it's not just me. I truly believe it's going to be so competitive that they'll go back and say, oh, perfect score. Well, did they have a master's degree required? Go back and look. And if not, you take it off, and there's nothing you can say. There's no defense to it. You can't respond to it. Okay. Also, people will ask me, well, should I put the name of the current director because they're so awesome? They've been here 30 years. They got this, this, and this. And I say, no, absolutely not. I would, number one, you're not going to have room. And we're looking at qualifications required of the project director, not the qualifications of the current director. Some other proposals specifically ask for that, and this one does not. It does not give you an advantage. I think it actually is a disadvantage because it really puts in the reader's face that you've been around for a while. And I feel, Teresa, looking at the SSS competition, that our returning applicants were judged more harshly than our newbies. Okay. They lost points that some of the newbies that we did get funded didn't lose points on, thank God, but they took the same points off of the same stuff we wrote for the older programs. And they had prior experience points. So what do you think about that? I mean, that's what I'm feeling from the schools.
Yeah, definitely. I think all cards are on the table, and we it's been demonstrated that they are, and so we just want to continue to learn from what has just happened with the recent competitions, and that's a core element. Is there seemed to be a different standard, but I do recall early on there was a talk about the questioning of programs continue to get funding versus new programs. So. I remember that, and I don't know what meeting I was in, but it was coming from the administration when I heard it.
Meaning that they're taking a deeper look or at the existing programs.
It was actually the Secretary of Education. In one of the hearings, she specifically said that there was concern about programs continuing to get funding and other programs not having the opportunity to get funding. Yeah.
I see. There you go. So, yep, that sounds about right. Do you want to take the next question? I mean, it's about the other personnel. I don't know if you have anything you wanted to say about that was different from the first thing.
What was the second question?
I'm sorry. The qualifications required of each of the other personnel to be used in the project. Do we have any? I haven't heard of any minimum educational credentials.
Let's see, two.
For the rest of the staff,
I mean, nothing major. I think it's just really about tying their qualifications to the objectives of the program, academic support, advising, persistence, and graduation. So, any comments you can make around, their qualifications, and you want them to have some level of expertise of helping and supporting participants or students from that area. I think that, of course, advising and mentoring, those are, components, parent engagement. So, I mean, I don't know that I would be too specific about all those things, but definitely you are wanting to demonstrate that you want people to have qualifications of experience with the population that you serve or similar populations that would just kind of translate over nicely into your TRIO project.
Also, I might want to add for my advisors, it'd probably be very smart to, or I would recommend that they have at least, a bachelor's degree. Some people have asked me, well, can we get associate's degrees? And I said, I wouldn't push that. Could be another thing, no, don't, push, say required, master's preferred, whereas the director, master's required. Who
Mhm.
knows, higher preferred. You could put that there as a preference. Doesn't mean you're stuck having to go with the higher preference, but definitely for the advisors. The other thing is when you're looking at these qualifications, like Teresa was saying, tied it into the objectives somehow, if an objective on college enrollment, right? So for both EOC and Talent Search. So make sure that you stress that one of the qualifications is that these folks have experience assisting Talent Search or EOC eligible residents or students with admissions and financial aid applications. See how we tied it into that? You could even put in parentheses post-secondary objective or objective, whatever it is, D or objective D for both programs, just to let the reader know, hey, we're directly looking at qualifications that they have experience in the objectives. Another tip could be to look at the job descriptions. And again, I wanted to stress that this is not supposed to be necessarily a job description, but you could look at the current job descriptions, I'm hoping, and maybe in a way reverse it so that it turns into a qualification. But again, you don't have a lot of room to put every darn thing here. Pick the ones that are directly related to the objectives. And if there aren't any, then okay, then you want to you may not be able to use too much of the job description, but that could be something that you could look at your needs assessment to realize, hey, how come there's such a disconnect between the job description we give somebody from the qualifications? So that could also be a way to spend some time, realistic time, when you're reviewing or evaluating your quality of personnel, which is in the regulations, as compared to what HR is saying you have to utilize. So that could be another way to do it. I think we have a couple of questions, Teresa.
Yeah, the first one, will there still be points for employing personnel who have overcome? That's a question we're getting to in just a second. That's number
Mhm.
3. So
Yeah,
we'll answer that one in that one for you, Cindy. Let's see. Did you say that the grant proposal that we need to talk about work with, what, I'm sorry, did you say that on the grant proposal that we need to talk about work with students' outcomes and success in that area? Are we saying that in general or specifically about our current director? No, you're saying it in general, not specifically about the current director.
correct. Yes. You don't want to bring any specific, any to one specific person that's currently in place. And nor do you have to bring up experience achieving 80% of their, the college enrollment objective or anything like that. Just experience in the services that would lead to that objective, so to speak. We have a question about the budget section. Should I include the salary and benefit amount for each staff member as it will be in year 5 so that I'm budgeting for the highest possible amount, or only the budget for year 1? This is, you try to make sure in year 1 that you max out as much as you can, but then you've got to realize, what else do I have left over? I mean, if I plan for year 5, I would barely have any money to cover just the salaries. So there's a mixture about that. I want you to be, what you should do is, you really want to see what's happening. You should do a spreadsheet that has all 5 years. And this is internal. You only show the first year to the reader, but really everybody out there should do this just to see if we stay at level funding and your costs are going to go up, you're going to see at the very bottom, you should plug in where the gap is. And so you should look ahead to see where that gap is. You might have to, in the first year of the grant, to make it look like you have enough money for everything. You might not be able to go totally max, but don't also go under so that you'll be, hurting for funds. So my recommendation would be to, in your 25, I'm sorry, in your 26, 27 budget, right? Because that's the one that we have to show moving forward. Yeah, because we're 25, 26. Yeah. So 26, 27 budget. Whatever you're getting now as salaries, I would plug in some sort of percentage increase, um, and assume that it's going to be higher for your year 5. But I probably couldn't afford to predict what would happen 5 years later, because then all my money would go there. And then how do I show that you have some other money to support, unless you've got other institutional funds to pay for everything else? So when you do that 5-year budget, it really lets you know if everybody stays in place, where the gaps start happening pretty much in year 2. We haven't seen that, y'all, because a lot of us have been living off of carryover, Teresa. So you don't realize, but if you had everybody in place how it's supposed to be and use up all your funds every year, you should be short. You should be short. So anyway, to answer your question, I would include for each staff member, as it will be in the first year of the grant, as much as you can predict for that first year. And then you can also do an internal 5-year spreadsheet that kind of tells you what the real deal will be, so what you can expect later on. So I guess you can't be too for real in the grant proposal, because then you won't have any money for anything else in the program. Right, Teresa? Because it's going to take all your funding for just personnel and fringe. All right, so let's move on to the next question. Teresa, that's the one we're going to talk about. The plan to employ personnel who have succeeded in overcoming the disadvantages of circumstances like those of the population of the target area. And here's 3 points. The plan to employ personnel who have succeeded in overcoming the disadvantages, already that's a trigger word, right, Teresa, of circumstances like those of the population of the target area. They're not going to have time to change this. I think they're going to tell us to change our answer. But Teresa, there's no way they can change the question at this late in time, because that's in the regulations. That literally takes an act of Congress. They can't change that. But definitely we will have to change the way we answer. It's just because ever since I was in TRIO, Teresa, I've always been told verbally, it's never been really in writing, that I need to go and talk about preference and how we're looking for, to give priority. And I've written all those things. I've used the word preference. I've used the word priority. I've used extra points. I've said it because that's what I was told would be acceptable by the department and by the readers, even though it really was never in writing with the department. Look at this question, right? The only way it gets kind of triggerish is with the disadvantages wording. So think of it that way. I think it's not the question itself that's the problem. If there is a problem, if we want to call it a problem, it's my mindset as a grant writer all these years across all the Department of Ed programs that had a similar question to this, that it was always focused on making sure that, and getting points and sometimes losing points, like in Gear Up, Teresa, where they didn't say I was mentioning the diversity or hiring people or putting an emphasis on hiring folks that match the population. You see? So that's where I'm coming from. So it's a struggle. So I'm going to ask Teresa what her tips are, and I'll come back with some tips of my own that I'm having to relearn how to answer this question.
Mm-hmm. I think that this is an opportunity to reiterate that you are selecting the most qualified individuals based on their not only on the experience but on their education or what have you. So you're hiring the most qualified people. I think this is where you would want to reiterate that. But then I think that part of it is as Lisa was talking about, and I was just continue to rethink this. It specifically says, succeeded in overcoming the disadvantages. I think for me, it's really about, how do you can talk about it, but I think there's an opportunity to shift the focus to, you know, people who have experiences serving students facing educational barriers and things of that sort, and who may have experienced some of the same things. I'm not being articulate in that, but I think, shifting the focus to supporting and I have experience people who have or selected people who have experiences serving students who have faced barriers and supporting them with overcoming those barriers of going off to college. And you can, I think you can still answer the question without being very direct about the overcoming me overcoming the disadvantages.
Mhm.
But I think that's less of the focus in my mind as I'm writing, and more of the focus on those who have experiences with this population of students who have disadvantages in overcoming. But there's some new information that's coming out to where this is not frowned upon. So I was in a training this past week or last week, and this whole overcoming disadvantages is core to the Department of Transportation and some of what they've been putting out. And they're saying for you to if you're a disadvantaged company, remember it used to be race, they've
Mhm.
changed it to where now it's, overcoming disadvantages where you've been left out of competition. So I think it's mixed, and so I think there's more that we will hear within the next, by the time we get to the point of the competition. But I'm just really shifting my focus to be more about um, less on the person and more on them having the experiences with the population who need from that perspective. So Lisa, you can help me with that.
But what I'm thinking is now, based on your recent experience with the disadvantage not being such a trigger word,
Mhm.
you know what? Fine. So now I know they probably won't change this, but I don't think I feel comfortable yet using disadvantaged in my response still.
Mhm. I agree.
So I would probably use talent search eligible. So it replace that overcoming the circumstances faced by talent search or EOC eligible until they say no, it's okay, use disadvantage, but I can still, you know, and throughout the whole proposal, I'm so used to saying low income first generation, disadvantaged, students that are, all those trigger words. I had them all over my
Mhm.
proposals. And
Mhm.
I'm just changing it now to make it based on the eligibility of that person, talent search or EOC eligible. And yeah, I agree with you 150% that we need to focus on the person's experience in those areas and not so much on matching the diversity of the population. And I used to get points off when I didn't say that they would be bilingual in El Paso or in certain areas. And I'm not going to bring that up unless I hear otherwise. I'm going to stress it on focusing on their experience of their work, their personal and professional experiences, as someone who's overcome the obstacles faced by going to college or obtaining financial aid to go to college, is faced by talent search or EOC eligible residents in the target area. Okay, that's what I would do, and probably do a couple of drafts. And again, and I would make sure, just like we have identification, recruitment, and selection of our participants, a couple of bullets, no more than a little couple of sentences, perhaps, or maybe a little mini table on how you identify folks like this, personnel that have overcome the obstacles faced by talent search eligible participants, for example, then how you recruit them and how you would select them. Okay. And it does need to fall into place. People say, well, HR does this and this. Okay. Somehow include that. So you're still doing something that's following the institution's requirements, but come on here. They want to see the focus being on you're doing something a little extra to try to make sure that you're looking for folks that have had the same experiences. Okay. And that. So it's worth 3 points. So yes, whoever asked that question, if you stick with the same answer, if you stick with the answer I've had, you're probably going to lose points. I gotta really redo that and get the same amount of points, but worded in a different way and stressed in a different way. Okay.
And quickly, Lisa, and the I think if you refer back, I believe it's in the Google Drive where it speaks about the guidance that was given to Gear Up
Mhm.
grant writers,
There.
or
Mhm.
when we were writing those grants, and they really talked about the trigger words, and they gave you words that you might
Exactly.
want to consider using. I feel like that was probably the best guidance that I've gotten from a grant writing perspective, was when I was writing
Europe.
the Europe grant, and it was in
Mhm.
the middle of the vortex and tsunami of all of what was happening,
Mhm.
because I think the grant was due what it was
Well,
due
it was due
February.
and then they opened it up and gave us 10 days to redo it.
Yeah, so I think
Crazy.
that that guidance that was given was probably the most helpful that translates over to my work with Trio.
And so that is in the Google Drive. I believe it's floating around there in the main drive between the two. And there's also a recent one that came out that COE put out similar to that. But I think the Gear Up one just is more user friendly to me to read for some reason. Now, the last part of this question is a more detailed answer to what you started talking about in the first part of the first question, where we talked about, and Teresa mentioned, make sure you tie in the qualifications for both the project director and the rest of the personnel. Somehow tie very quickly to the outcomes or the objectives, that they have to have experience in the objectives, right? As a service, what is, if someone wants to get their GED, right, that's one of your objectives, then you have to piggyback and write up, well, what kind of experience, what kind of services lead to somebody getting that. So that's where you could do that. Now, in the second part of the question, I think is where you can expand, and it's okay to repeat yourself. Repetition is great. And the second part of this question, you want to expand upon that and probably list each person, and also a little bit of I think it's a repeat of the question, Teresa, but in more detail, right? Number two, but focused on more of experience. I already mentioned experience briefly, years of experience, but now I want to make sure I tie it directly to the objective. I mean, that's what it says to do. If you have any thoughts on that, Teresa.
No, I agree with everything that you said. Just, make sure you're focused on those outcomes, graduation, persistence, and things of that sort when you're responding to this one, and just you're repeating some of what you've already talked about, re-emphasizing.
And someone asked, in the second part, who do you include? Um, uh, and on the requirements, I think of, I always think my project advisors, right? And then my project tutors, usually. If I have room, Teresa, I do mention the project administrative assistant if I have one. But that's pretty much it, right? Tutors, advisors. I can't think of anything else. Some other programs have, layers, and they have other positions. For right now, list everybody that's on board, but really it's people that are providing services directly to the students is the focus of it, I believe. What do you think,
I agree.
Teresa, about
I
that?
agree. I agree.
Somebody said one thing that concerns me about the term talent search eligible is that looking at the regulations, if you look at 64.3 who's eligible, it is much more than students that are low income first generation. Well, I just say, well, that way you're covered. So if you say that are talent search eligible, that covers all the definition, I think. Instead of, if I say low income first generation, I'm actually excluding people, because there's other students that are not low income first generation that could be served in EOC and talent search. But when you say about who's eligible for talent search, it kind of is an umbrella. So I think it includes more people when you use the terminology talent search eligible. I don't think it excludes anyone off. Do you, Teresa? I'm not.
No, I don't think so. No, not at all. Because again, I do encourage people to cite the regulation related to eligibility. So
Right.
therefore you are in alignment with the purpose of the regulatory language of the project. And I think you should start that early on in the proposal.
EOC and talent search, they have a lot. Their eligibility is broad. It's more broad than when we used to say low income and first generation only. So we were actually wrong before by not using the terminology talent search eligible instead of low income first generation. Okay. All right. So thank you all for joining us. I'm going to have to run off. I've got another training to do. Thank you, Teresa. Thanks for joining us. I hope you found this helpful. We should have this up by sometime tomorrow. Thanks for joining us. You all have a great week. Thank you all so much. Bye, Teresa. Thanks. Bye, Donna.